Hey everyone, Scott here, and today I'm going to be making a quick rules video to talk about the indestructible skill and how it actually works. I know it can be hard for people to keep a track of what you can and cannot do to an opponent's card that has the indestructible skill, so that's what we'll be covering in this video. So first up, what is indestructible? Indestructible is a keyword skill, and the definition of it can be found here in front of us. This is directly taken from the official play manual. If you bought any kind of starter deck product, you will have had a play manual at some point. There's like a play mat on one side and then a section on the back covering some of the rules of the game, including keyword skills, and this is taken from that. So indestructible is a keyword skill, but it's also a permanent skill. And cards with indestructible can't be KO'd or removed from the battle area by your opponent's cards, skills, or attacks. And one of the important things to note about this is says can't be KO'd or removed from the battle area. So indestructible only takes effect while a card is in the battle area. So if it's in any other area, if it's in your energy, in your hand, in your deck, it's treated as any other normal card. Indestructible gives it no protection whatsoever. So let's move on now to an example. So let's say our opponent has this Garlic Jr. in their battle area, and you can see down here it has the indestructible skill. And let's say we have this Broly here in our hand and we want to use this auto skill when we play it. So it says when this card is played, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and it costs 5 or less, KO it. So this is 5 or less, so we would be able to choose it. So can this card be KO'd by the skill of this Broly? And the answer is no, it can't be. If we go back quickly and take another look at the definition of indestructible, can't be KO'd or removed from the battle area by your opponent's card, skills, or attacks. So no, you would not be able to KO this Garlic Jr. with this Broly or any other card that lets you KO an opponent's battle card. Now, the one important thing you need to know is that cards with indestructible can still be chosen with skills. Like this Broly skill that let you KO something, you can still technically choose the card. It's just nothing will happen to it because it's protected by the indestructible skill. So let's look at another example quickly now. So let's say, again, our opponent has this Garlic Jr. in their battle area, and let's say that it is in rest mode. Then let's say that we have this Broly in our battle area. So we declare an attack with this Broly into this Garlic Jr. At the end of the battle, our total power is greater than our opponent's. Would the card that they have with indestructible be KO'd at the end of the battle? And the answer is no. Again, indestructible protects against being removed or KO'd by opponents' skills or attacks. So there are a lot of things in this game that you can do to your opponent's cards. I'm going to very quickly go through each of them one by one, and I'll quickly tell you whether they can or cannot affect a card with the indestructible skill. So for instance, can an opponent's card with indestructible be placed in its owner's drop area? The answer is no. It can't be sent to the warp either. It can't be placed in its owner's energy. It can't be returned to its owner's hand. Can't be returned to its owner's deck. It can't be put on the bottom of its owner's deck. It can't be put on the top of its owner's deck. You cannot gain control of an opponent's card with the indestructible skill. You cannot place an opponent's card with indestructible under one of your margin boos, and you cannot remove a opponent's card with indestructible from the game. Now, there's not actually any cards at the moment in the game that let you remove an opponent's battle card from the game. It's only really tokens that you can remove from the game at the moment. But just in case there is something in the future, no, that would not affect a card with indestructible either. So those are all the things that cannot be done to an opponent's card with indestructible. Now let's look at some of the things that you can do to an opponent's card with the indestructible skill. So first up, can you negate the skills of card with indestructible? And yes, you can. Whether that's negating all their skills, or there are some cards that let you negate a specific skill on an opponent's card. Again, you can negate just the indestructible skill if you have an effect that targets a single skill on an opponent's card. And then the important thing to know is that once a card has had its indestructible skill negated, you can do anything that we just talked about, like KOing it, sending it back to its owner's hand, putting it on the bottom of their owner's deck. All those things can be done to a card with indestructible if it has its indestructible skill negated. So next up, can you Mafuba in response to an attack of a card with Indestructible? The answer is yes. Mafuba doesn't actually remove the card from the battle area. It just simply goes on top of the card while it stays in the battle area. So there's no reason you cannot use Mafuba against a card with Indestructible. And we can even see here, this is from the card Q&A section of the website, specifically about Mafuba. And it's the 11th question about Mafuba. And the question says, when you attack with a battle card that has Indestructible, the opponent activates Mafuba. What happens? And the answer is, after the battle card's attack is negated, place Mafuba on top of the battle card with Indestructible. Can a card with Indestructible be removed by its owner's skills? And the answer to that is yes. And we can see that here. This is from the rule Q&A section. It's specifically the 4th question and answer about the Indestructible skill itself. And the question says, when you choose a battle card with Indestructible with Broly the Legendary Saiyan's auto skill, is it placed in the drop area? And the answer is yes. Indestructible is a skill which prevents cards from being KO'd or removed from the battle area due to opponent's effects, but not your own. So next up, can an opponent's card with Indestructible be switched to rest mode? The answer is yes. There's nothing about Indestructible that stops it from being switched to rest mode by an opponent's skill. Can cards with Indestructible be counterplayed? And the answer is yes, with an exception. So you can see over there on the left, I've changed the example card for the card with Indestructible to a different Garlic Jr. And this one has Deflect. So that's the important thing when it comes to whether or not a card can be counterplayed, is whether it has Deflect. Indestructible makes no difference whatsoever to whether a card can be counterplayed. So for instance, the Garlic Jr. that we've been using up to now as an example, that one doesn't have Deflect. So you could activate a counterplay in response to it being played from its owner's hand. Can a card with Indestructible have its power reduced? And the answer is yes. There's nothing about the way the Indestructible skill works that stops it from having its power reduced or even increased by opponent's effects. So for instance, if you played this cooler that we have on the right, it can choose 2 of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and give them minus 10k power for the turn. So let's say we played that and our opponent has this Garlic Jr. out. It would get its power reduced by 10,000. It would go down to only being 5k. So what happens if instead our opponent has this Garlic Jr. out and it gets its power reduced by 10k by the cooler there? Since it only has 10k, that would take it down to 0. Would that cause the Garlic Jr. to be placed in its owner's drop area? And the answer is yes. And the reason for that we can see in this Q&A. This is another one from the rules section about the Indestructible skill specifically. It's the 6th question and answer. And so the question is, if your battle card with Indestructible has its power lowered to 0 or less by an opponent's skill, is it placed in your drop area? And the answer is yes, it is placed in your drop area. Skills like Indestructible prevent cards from being removed from your battle area, but they still get placed in your drop area when an opponent's skill reduces their power to 0 or less. After you check to see if a card would be placed in a drop area by a skill, you then check to see if the card would be placed there by rules processing. The reason this is possible is because in this instance, rules processing is what places cards in the drop area, not the skill itself. So basically, when it comes down to it, let's say your opponent has this Garlic Jr. out, it gets its power reduced to 0 or below. There's basically a checkpoint that happens that takes place where it says, right, this card has had its power reduced to 0, therefore it's going to be removed via a skill. But then Indestructible kind of activates and says, no, I can't be removed by a skill. So that prevents it from being removed. But then another checkpoint takes place and basically says, you have a card in your battle area that has 0 power. That is not possible within the rules of the game. Therefore, the rules of the game say it has to be placed in its owner's drop area. And so because it's being removed by the rules rather than by the skill specifically, Indestructible no longer applies and it can be placed in the drop area. So really, this is one of the 2 main ways that you would remove a card with Indestructible. So the first way would be, like we talked about before, you negate its Indestructible skill, and then you use another effect to remove it from the battle area, or KO it. And then the second way would be to reduce its power to 0 or below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.